Hello, Charlie.
Well, Charlie, you're the last child left. Isn't that exciting? I don't know. You're a very lucky little boy. You get to see what's behind that door. Now, Charlie.
It's a restricted area. It's staff only.
Okay, let's get into something here. We've got a couple things we could talk about.
Are you recording?
Yeah. I'm always recording. Didn't we learn that in the last live stream?
What is your obsession with bringing up the last live stream?
I love it when you make a fool of yourself. It's what I live for, man. It really is. Who says, get no response on the group chat as usual. I'm about to stop posting this stuff as no one cares. To change the industry, we need to get rid of car guys that think they know and replace them with technicians.
Get rid of car guys that
think they know.
And
replace them with technicians.
Do you have to turn the USB power button on?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that would be really easy to like knock loose, or you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Where that one is secured with threads.
Yep.
Why would they design it like that? That doesn't make any sense. Is there a battery in that thing?
I don't know. Hey, so check this out. Zeke Young says doctors.
What happened to Adrian?
Well, listen, what I've learned about discussing things with you is that if you don't take on topic one, I need to move on to topic two, because if something doesn't like immediately set you off, you're going to drift off into Wonderland and talk about random. Boop.
What was that? Hey, so the last video I was messing with, the camera angle was not right because it had the shot was coming in like this way, mm-hmm. and you were getting completely blocked by the mic.
And that's the problem if I look this way. That's why I'm having you sit here, because there's nothing I can do. If you're sitting here and I turn and look at you like that, that's what it does. The only way we can fix that is we can put the cameras in the middle of the table.
Is that a thing?
Mm-hmm. I could put Joby's on the middle of the table and not
just like right here, and then have them shoot right
in.
It'd be easier to transport than the tripods.
Yeah,
right?
But we'd have to go to a different lens.
Oh, yeah. Those lenses weren't cheap.
No.
Let's pass on that. No, let's talk about the training. I'm down for the training.
All right. Let me get back to it.
And I think that was the gist of the whole thing.
Yeah. So what he's done is he's posted. Adrian Lowe's posted a picture about a free training in a chat group, and no one responds. So he says, I get no response on the chat group as usual. I'm about to stop posting this stuff as no one cares. To change the industry, we need to get rid of car guys that think they know and replace them with technicians. Well, I mean, come on now. The car guys that think they know, I mean, who's he referring to? Is he referring to enthusiasts that, you know what I'm saying? Like, or is he talking about technicians?
Saying that the technicians are just enthusiasts.
Okay.
I don't know. I understand where he's coming from. The issue is that everybody's busy.
Yeah.
Everybody's got life going.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but a couple things about it, right? For one, I have found that free trainings don't work. If you're not charging something, people aren't going to show up because they don't see the value for it. Right? Now, if you get a group like Brandon Dills there for a little bit was like trying to get everybody together, right? And he'd call everybody up and he'd say, hey, we're going to go to my shop. Hey, we're going to go to John's shop. Hey, we're going to go to Lucas's shop. And he would get everybody together and they'd all just kind of sit around and talk and tinker with cars and everybody would just hang out, right? And so they enjoyed that. They had a good time, but it's a lot of work. One person has to be organizing that and making it happen, right?
Sure.
Kind of like a diag day. Whereas I have seen time and time again, like the ASTA events, if there's not some type of charge, people will not show up. And that seems to be the factor, right? Like you can try different things. You can change your marketing. You can adjust things. You can do this. You can do that. But if you don't charge to be there, people won't show up for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's because they don't perceive the value in it. I don't know if it's that a lot of people will commit, and unless they've spent money on it, they're like, I just want to lay in bed today. You know what I mean?
You have to also consider the time that they're doing it. So at night, it makes it harder because everybody's tired. It's like, I don't want to go to a training tonight.
Yeah,
so
I
they
do
bail.
not like nighttime training at all.
That makes it difficult. But during the day, you're losing on revenue. It's like,
Right.
hey, we're not going to get any cars out today. And it's not even the money. It's the customer needs the car back. You see what I'm saying? That becomes a bigger issue too when you're promising, hey, it's not going to be Tuesday.
Yeah, that's
Wednesday.
bigger than the money for me.
Well, a lot of times it goes hand in hand because they're like, hey, I'll approve 2,500 if you can have it done tomorrow. It's like, okay. Oh, wait, we're closed tomorrow because we're going to this training. So it's not going to be till Wednesday. That makes things difficult.
Yeah.
And the customer's going to go, well, okay, I need my car back.
Right.
Loaners help, but only
It's not going to solve that.
Especially if they've got like a big family and you don't have a big fleet of vehicles where like, hey, I've got another minivan you can jump into. So that has to be considered as well. So the during the day training has to be off the table a little bit. Other than, especially if you're going to do it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So if it's a weekly or monthly training, all of a sudden your 22 work days turns into 21, and then that turns into a whole thing, right?
Yep.
And the bigger the shop, the bigger the hit in revenue.
Yeah,
if it's a one-man shop, it's
right. Like, I was talking to Mike Allen about that the other day and talking about the revenue you lose closing one day.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, my shop is a minimum about $5,500 a day of revenue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't afford to lose $5,500 out of a week. I mean, I do it, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like,
you're doing it like once a year. For ASTE, you shut down the shop, everybody goes to ASTE.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But, for example, we're going to do it for ASTE, but we didn't do it for Vision. Now, it probably would have been cheaper for me to do it for Vision. None of the pay for flights and things like that. But once a year is fine. But you're not going to do it on a continuous basis every single month without having to jack up your prices, and then you have to then justify it on the bottom line and say, well, I'm going to end up losing out on this revenue, but I can make it up if I jack up my labor rate and my pricing matrix by X amount of dollars to make up for that one day a month that we're going to end up losing out on.
Right. I mean, just in a shop with 3 techs, that's $66,000 for me. Right. That's $66,000 of revenue for me.
Yeah.
That's a healthy chunk of change. Right. If it's one day a month.
If it's one day a month. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like that's a whole other person.
But, you know, and I agree with you. And as you grow, right, you get more staff members. So the revenue's higher. So, and then maybe what you do is instead of closing the shop down on a single day, is you say, look, the shop's going to be open, but we're going to run 3 techs this day, 3 techs this day. So if you got 6 techs, right?
So, but all you're doing is, I don't know, maybe cutting revenue in half that day.
But you are, but you're also, like, for me, the bigger thing is taking care of the client. So now we're still
Sure.
taking care of the client. Somebody's there to take care of them. They don't feel like they've been abandoned, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a big one for me.
But then if you get caught in between, where like we have one service advisor, not two, so now the service advisor doesn't get to go anywhere,
Right.
to any training whatsoever because
Yeah.
somebody has to be there, or the shop owner's got to be there to cover the front counter, or at two service advisors things get a little bit more flexible, but then you have to have the technician count and the space
Right.
to justify to be able to pay for it. I don't know.
Well, some of the comments were talking about the owner perspective and talking about if I send a technician to the training and he doesn't bring anything back from it, right? He doesn't even want to go, right? And you haven't you shared that some of your guys don't want to go to training? They
No,
don't,
heck no. I got to force them.
right?
I got to force them. And combining the training with something experiential makes it easy. Makes it far easier to get them to go. For example, it's like, hey, we're all going to North Carolina, and we're all going to hit this place for dinner, and we're going to go ride go-karts, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it becomes a team building thing on top of the training, right?
Right.
So the team building aspects there, which does translate into a better work environment.
Absolutely.
Especially if you do it on a
100%.
continuous basis.
Yes,
It can't be
100%.
just a one-time pizza party, we call it good.
Yeah.
So it's got to be continuous, right? So we do the experiential thing plus the training all combined. That makes more sense for me. And the staff, the technicians want to do that. Like
Yeah.
they want to go because it's, almost like a mini vacation.
Right.
Right. But just, hey, tonight there's a training. You need to go.
Yeah, you can forget
They're
it.
not enthusiastic about it.
I mean, I can get my guys to go.
Yeah, mine will go
Right.
too.
They'll go, but I mean, and we've talked a little bit about that. Terry has said multiple times, if we go to a training and I can't come back and implement it, it was wasted, right? Like if I'm not going to come back and use it, by the time I get around to doing it next time, like that knowledge is not there anymore.
But I mean, how can you even account for that? What do you do?
I don't know.
The AC class helps
Mhm.
right before AC season.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you say something to them and they're like, what, AC class again? It's like, hey, you never know. You might pick something up that might help you diagnose a car or whatever. I don't know. I think the idea of training is held with a certain reverence,
Mhm.
as though, I don't know. It just feels like something that some people hold themselves in higher regard because they do continuous training, where somebody that isn't, and that's we've talked about this before, it's like 1% of the top 10%, it's a percentage, a small percentage of the whole industry actually shows up to training.
Right.
So they almost go to training knowing the drawbacks that we talked about, the revenue, hidden revenue, the fact that you can't implement everything immediately. Most of the training is not high quality. It's sometimes it's just pizza parties. Knowing all that, they still go to training because they want to be considered a technician that goes to training. Like, oh, I train 50 hours a year or 100 hours a year. That other guy doesn't. I'm obviously better. Does that make sense?
Of course. Absolutely. And here's my thing, right? Like when I think about that and we come back to that discussion, there's a lot of places or a lot of people, even in the group, who talk about that. They go into the group and they say, all these shop owners, the evil shop owner doesn't pay for training and doesn't set us up for training and doesn't take us to training. There's only so many times you're going to ask. And half the shop says, no, I don't want to do that. And that one guy says, yeah, I want to go. Right? Now, if one guy wants to go, and it's a touchy subject, right? Because like Eric really wanted to come to Vision, right? And he wanted to come out here, and he could have come to me and said, hey, will you pay for me to come out here? I would have looked at the classes and I would have said, hey, for your trajectory, right now, that probably wouldn't be the best fit for you, right? We're going to iScan, right? I'm taking him to iScan. That training is in line with his trajectory of where he's going, right? Those are the things he needs to advance his career to the next level.
Sure.
Okay. And so I think we got to be careful, because if we get into this loop of saying, well, shop owners won't pay for training and you guys will pay for training for your guys, but it's not fair because nobody else will do that. We have to make sure they understand, like, what training are you talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is it in line with the trajectory of where you're going with your career? Is it in line with where the shop wants to go? And I think it is very, very important that we train our people. But you can't just apply the same filter to everybody. You can't apply the same filter to every shop and every technician. And so do I think that shops should be paying to bring a tech to Vision, or should be paying to bring a tech to iScan, or whatever it is? Yes, I do. I think especially when it comes to experiential things, those are a big deal, and you need to be doing those for sure. But if a tech comes to me and says, hey, I want to go to this one-off random training, and it doesn't apply to what I have as far as a vision for my business, I'm probably going to say no. I mean, now
It depends, though, if you need to send them there to keep them engaged. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I have no problem sending Keith Perkins is
Fairly local to you.
well, he's 6 hours away.
Yeah.
Which isn't that bad of a drive. Maybe
Right.
it's 4.5.
Yeah.
So if he's got a class going on, especially on a Saturday,
Yeah.
like we've done it before. We'll shut down half a day on Saturday. They go take off driving. I pay for the hotel room Friday night. They go to class Saturday. They drive back Saturday night, or maybe I'll pay for the hotel for 2 nights or whatever. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, of course.
It's experiential. It's usually fairly affordable. I don't end up shutting down the shop for forever and a day.
Yeah.
And the classes are typically fairly advanced.
Absolutely.
That it pushes them
100%.
intellectually.
And I would make the exact same decision, right?
But even if it's just one technician who's like, hey, I've got this really weird class that I want to. There was a guy offering classes on diag.net,
Mhm.
and it was on hexadecimal codes
Okay.
and how to interpret the information, how to pull the information and then interpret it. And one of my techs was like, he was hardcore into it. And the guy wasn't charging nearly enough for the information. He just wanted to put it out there that he had deciphered all this information. He had put it together and he wanted to share it. Good for him. I love that. And so he was hardcore into it. And so at night he was sitting on these 2-3 hour classes, just going through all this information. And he was excited about it, 100% engaged. Even if that meant like, hey, I want to, on Friday in a couple months, they're going to be doing this class in person, you know, and it's going to cost this much. And this, like, yeah, you're going to look at the cost and go, it's going to pay for itself to keep him engaged in the craft.
Absolutely.
Versus saying just no, go back to do your oil changes. That's going to, motivation wise and culture wise and
I agree.
Engagement wise, it's going to lower it if you don't entertain the idea.
But I guess what I'm saying though is that there's got to be checks and balances, right? Like every tech in the shop could come in and say, hey, I want to go to training, and they want to go to every single training event in the country. And you could easily spend $150,000, $200,000 sending people to training in a year.
Yeah.
Right. And is there a return on that investment? To a degree, but are you going to get $150,000 or $200,000 back from it next year? No, you're not. Right.
The return on investment is feels.
Yeah.
I got the feels.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
And so look, and here's the thing. We've talked a lot lately. In my opinion, we've talked a lot about improving our industry, right? We're talking about changing the industry. But the problem is that if we aren't responsible, right, being a good shepherd of what you have, and so it's great we want to pay technicians more. It's great that we want to spend money on better tools and better facilities and all of these things. But it's all a hill of beans if 6 months from now we're not financially stable enough to make sure we can take care of our people. Yeah. To make sure they have insurance, to make sure if something happens, man, I broke my leg, I can pay you for a couple of weeks to take care of you. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And like the instant gratification of getting something like that seems to be a bigger deal than the realization. I don't think people see it like that. They don't see that everything we do has to have a return on investment because we have to be secure. So they don't see that. And they're just like, well, I'm going to get better. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. But when you put the numbers on paper, like those numbers have to work. You can't
They don't work at all.
Well, I understand. That's what I'm saying. If you go too far with it, though, you can't generate enough profit elsewhere, right? If you're not a good steward with the money that you have and the revenue that you have and manage the business properly, you're not being a good steward of that. So therefore, you're not taking care of your people.
I think that goes without saying. But I think we're traversing a minefield here because I think it's taboo to say some of the things that we're saying. For example, I'm going to burn some bridges here. I remember the very first time I came to Vision. I'm going down the escalator, and this local shop owner, he has since sold his shop, and he's out. Smart guy, hard-working shop owner. He's one of those like, I see what I need to do. Puts his head down, gets it done.
Yeah,
and built a shop, very profitable shop, very well-equipped shop, and with a great reputation in the area.
Okay.
And the shop's in probably one of the worst neighborhoods of Kansas City. And the guy absolutely kills it. Anyway, I'm going down the escalator, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And we shake hands and stuff like that. And I go, "Yeah, I didn't shut down the shop. I think it was just me and somebody else." And he's like, "Man, you gotta shut down the shop, and everybody's got to come to Vision." And I'm just doing the math in my head, and I'm like, "Well, okay, well, it's not just the cost; it's the lost revenue, right?"
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And add that all together, and we didn't have travel, and we don't have hotels, so it's just I'm driving, it's whatever. But I'm still covering their salary, so it's lost revenue, salary. I still have the expenses of the shop.
Yeah.
Plus the cost of training. And I'm adding it up in my head, and I'm like, man, that's expensive to do. And he's like, yeah, but you got to do it, man. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. It's not going to equal additional revenue in your shop. It's not.
Right. It's not going to. No.
There's no way to make the money back.
Right.
There's no way to make the money back. You are not going to gain enough knowledge. I don't care how good the sales training is. Okay. I don't care how good the technical training is. You're not going to, dollars and cents, show me that by the end of the year, 365 days later, I have shown a 2-to-1 return on my investment, a 1-to-1 return on my investment. Right. This is a sunk cost. With that being said, we just had Shasta Nelson on the podcast, and she talks about, in her book, how to increase engagement in the workplace. The number one reason somebody stays at a job, the number one reason they stay at a job is because of engagement.
Yeah.
If they feel they are not engaged with the work, they will leave. They will leave.
Right.
This is ahead of salary, benefits, time off, it would stack with the culture, all that BS. All of it is secondary to engagement. They need to feel like they're involved, like they're part of
something,
what you're doing.
Yeah.
And what she lays out in the book is that if you want to reduce turnover, which has an actual dollars and cents effect on the business, a significant one. I'm going to go off in tangents again, but Bill Hill, we had Bill Hill on the podcast. Remember Bill Hill? He was talking about hiring a technician. And he either said 30 or 35,000. He goes, every month that technician is not in that bay, it's costing me $35,000 a month. Every month he's not in that bay.
Yeah.
So if it's going to cost me an extra $20,000 to get him in the door a year, $30,000, $40,000, like there's a threshold, sure, but it's going to be a pretty big threshold before you hit that dollar amount.
Yeah, of
I
course.
have to get him in the door. I got to put somebody in there. It's costing me $35,000 a month in gross revenue, right? Perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. It was a mindset, a paradigm shift for me. All of a sudden, it's like $22 an hour, $25 an hour, $30 an hour, $32. Like, what are we arguing about here?
Right. It's somebody said in ASOG a while back, a technician doesn't cost you anything. right? And the perspective they had is the revenue a technician can generate is so much that without that, right, you don't have anything at all, and you're over here worried about it, a $5 an hour raise or a $2 an hour raise. And I just had a conversation with my friend Tanya the other day, and I was like, look, the problem is where you're at is if that person is poachable where you're at, right? And so if they go talk to anybody else, they could be poached, and you're upside down in that, right? And it's not just about that. I mean, you want to take care of them, right? You want to make sure they're paid well, and the business, if it is healthy, has the financial ability to do that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we're arguing over like small fries. You know what I'm saying?
If you look at the whole picture, it's insignificant. It doesn't matter. So my point is that there's a real dollars and cents impact on losing that person, and the number one way to keep them from leaving is to make sure they're engaged. Engagement comes from several things, but one of the things that she talks about in the book is making sure that you guys are spending quality time together outside of the business realm to grow those business friendships.
Yeah, of course.
That relationship will get stronger if you step out and go do something together. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be all the time. And it isn't always necessarily lunches. Sometimes it is something experiential. So if that's the case, then it makes sense to then, at that point, make a big thing of it. Shut down the shop, send everybody to XYZ training, but you're not sending them necessarily for the training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you want to make sure you're doing it together. Does that make sense?
Of course. And look, beyond that though, right? Like I have another thought is that the danger of not training, right? So when we talk about the training itself, the danger of not training is I think the biggest part of that is that if we're not training, I have watched shops do this, people I really care about. And these guys 10 years ago, 15 years ago were masters of their craft, right? They'd been in the dealership, they'd been through some training, they had some knowledge given to them. They went through this process, they opened their own shop. And over the years, they never expanded that knowledge beyond where they were right now. And so technology just keeps trudging forward. And so eventually they get to the spot that they're no longer relevant, right?
I think that's a straw man we build up in our heads.
Okay.
Because training does not mean you. And I'm not saying that this doesn't exist. I'm sure there are shops that just put the blinders up. I know there are shops that just put their blinders up and they're like, we smash the bare parts in, we slap in calipers, brakes, and this is what we do, right? And you give them a no crank, no start condition with a push button and a security problem on a Lexus, completely lost. They're completely lost. Mm-hmm. They don't know what to do. And that's because they have let their and that's not even an ego thing. It's not that they thought they knew everything. They know that technology is changing. They just don't care to stay up.
They're not interested in going to that next level.
But I think most shops aren't like that. I think most shops try to keep up as best they can. It is absolutely training to sit down and read a theory of operation on a newer vehicle.
Yeah.
I need to figure out how this system works.
Mm-hmm.
How's that not training? How's that not sitting down and reading through and then figuring out, okay, how do I apply this to this particular problem in order to diagnose the situation? Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
So if you're subscribing to factory information, to good service information, you're sitting down and you have a process that includes reading theory of operation and becoming informed on the system that you're trying to repair. That's a form of training.
It is.
You may never go to a training class. But you can still competently repair vehicles because you're sitting down and, hey, I'm going to learn how the VCM system works on a Honda Odyssey that with cylinder deactivation, and how the VTEC works on top of it, and how the rocker arms. I'm going to learn that system so I can diagnose it properly. That doesn't mean I shut down the shop or I skip out on a Friday so I can go to this 8-hour training class that's being put on by this trainer to learn this system. If you can read and apply, you're doing training on a daily basis.
I agree, but here's the thing, and maybe this is a perspective thing. Okay, so I've got shops that I know and I talk to often, right? That and I was always taught by Rick that a shop's either growing or a shop's dying, right?
Okay.
Like there's not anything in between. And so, did you just overflow your drink?
No.
Oh, you're pouring it in your cup. Okay. So if they're growing or they're dying, and I don't necessarily know that that's 100% the case, but I guess my point is I know shops who all they're going to do is brake repairs. All they're going to do is change the parts that they know are bad. That they'll plug the scan tool up. That's really the extent of as far as they want to go. They'll read the codes, and if it's a code for something, they'll change that part, right? Some of it may be that I'm not seeing the actual inner workings of that shop. So I'm not there to see that they're actually digging into something major, that they're actually reading system and operation. But from my perspective, it feels like they're not. It feels like what they're doing is they're just fixing cars, and they're like, look, I just want to do this because I can make money doing this, and I don't have to go any further. I can still do what I'm doing right now and make just as much money as I want to make, and I'm not worried about it. Well, eventually you get to the point that 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, the shop is not relevant anymore, right? The technology passed them by. The new cars that are coming in, they have to work on them. And I think slowly you pick up that stuff for the new car, and you're able to work on the new car because you learn the new thing about it. You learn that you had to replace GDI fuel lines, maybe the hard way. But you're taking step after step after step moving forward. I don't know. I think training is valuable. But I think you're right. I think it's more about
it's not valuable. It's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But to say that training is only involves going to this class or going to a vision, or that's it. It's if you're not there, you're not quote unquote training. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it depends on the individual, and if the individual stays infinitely curious, there is so much information available. So much information.
Yeah.
I mean, we get these magazines for free that show up at our door. And these same trainers that are at Vision have written very lengthy articles about XYZ system. Well, how is that not training if I'm sitting down reading through that system?
Yeah, and then you get hungry for that knowledge, and you go search and you find.
Maybe it's a sophisticated system that's going to require that I sit down and do a little bit more digging and find out and maybe pick up some of those nuances.
Yeah.
Maybe. Or the system is pretty straightforward, and I just learned everything there could possibly be to know about oil.
Right.
And the oil designations. And now there's 0. Isn't it 08 or something stupid like that?
016 and 08.
No, it's lower than 16.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Those are the two lowest ones I know of.
Yeah. So you want to learn about that? You read through the article. Why are you going through a class? It's not necessary.
No, I tend to agree with you, right? And I think a lot of the reason we go to a class is experience. The experience of talking to people, the networking, right? For me, that's what I get out of it.
I think that's just justification. I think we look back on it and go, well, you don't necessarily go for the training, you go for the networking. It's like, yeah, okay. So we can do a networking event for freezies that's, if that's really the benefit, then we can get around having to put on these massive monolith shows. You see what I'm saying?
I know, but it's the experience. It's experiential, like you said. It's
experiential if the shop
going to eat and riding go-karts.
Okay, but that's if that's what your intent is with the training. That's how I've justified the training. The answer I got from that shop owner, that local shop owner, told me, "Oh, you just got to shut down. It's worth it. It's worth it." I don't think he could articulate. I don't think anybody's even thought about it long enough to go, except for Dutch. Dutch will tell you it does not. There is no ROI. There is no ROI. He will tell you add up the math. Like, it doesn't work. The math doesn't work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
He's right. He's 100% right. He doesn't say it very often either because, again, I think it's a little taboo to say.
Yeah. Hurt some feelings.
It hurts some feelings. But I think he's 100% right. I think there is no way to justify the cost. However, I think if you sit down and you say, part of the culture here is that we do things together as a team that are outside the normal operation of the shop, and it isn't just going to lunch every so often.
Yeah.
We do that every single Monday. We do a meeting and we buy lunch and we all eat together, right? We do it every single week. That's not enough. We need to go outside the shop and do something fun that we all enjoy so we can get to know each other. And that's how you build the relationships within the shop. That increases the shop culture. That increases engagement, right?
Yeah.
And engagement lowers the probability of losing somebody, which has an actual impact on the business.
For sure. And you know, I think one of the reasons, you know, back to Adrian's post, I think one of the reasons that people aren't showing up, one of the reasons that people aren't committing their own time to these shows or to these trainings is because they're not really marketing them well, right? Like there's, you know, and I think they are marketed. But how many people do we talk to that
the ones that we advertise obviously do a fantastic job of choosing how they market their.
Well, I mean, look, I'm just saying, like, there's people, you know, as of last night, I was messaging somebody. He sent me a message, had a bunch of questions. I'm like, hey, are you at Vision? He's like, I want to talk about this thing. Maybe if we're somewhere and we can do a podcast about it at some point. Cool. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about it. And I'm like, hey, are you at Vision? He's like, man, I literally just found out about Vision when somebody posted it in the group the other day. He's like, I've never heard of it. He's like, I'm only 5 hours away. But he's like, I just didn't plan for it. I can't be there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, this show's been going on for a long time. Like
20 years. 20,
right. Like, how
30,
do you not know about it? He's like, man, until I joined the group, this is the first automotive circle I've been in. Right. And that's the third or fourth conversation like that I've had in the last 2 weeks. You know, so a lot of people don't know about it.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to fault the training people because it's like there's only so much budget. There's only so much time. But I think you're right in the sense that one realization that I had when I opened up my business is that I thought, we talked about this, so I thought I was opening up a business to fix cars.
Yeah.
That's not what I do.
Yeah.
My job is to get customers. I am in the customer acquisition game.
Yep.
I need to find people that want their car fixed, and then I slough it off to somebody to fix cars. I could be entirely 1099 and just hand the repairs off to a mechanic somewhere. My job is to get the customer. When you become a trainer, you put together a course, your job is now to find
People
seats
to
butts to put in those seats. Like, that's your job now.
Right.
And nobody looks at it that way. Everybody's like, oh, I need to fix this training class, and I'm going to introduce this
I need to
book,
train this
and
stuff that nobody else is training. And
I need to introduce these ideas, and I'm going to work on the way I present. And this, it's like, okay, that's all great. Nobody shows up to your training. All that work you put is for nothing. So your job is to find people to put in those seats.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, and you know, we talk about the value of training. The one spot that I will say there is a genuine ROI on training is management, leadership, and ownership, right? Like those areas, there, you know, and maybe just the first 10 classes, right?
But it doesn't have to be classes. That's what I was talking about with the articles and this,
same
that, and the
thing.
other.
Like if I'm, you know, we've got the program with the Institute where they'll do the business analysis and they'll, right? That's all it takes, right? That is training, right? That is training.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll sit down and they will tell you, like, hey, there are some things that you don't know about your business.
Right.
Let me show you.
And so you remember the first time you sat down with a coach and they went over your numbers? I remember the first time. It was a little overwhelming, and so it takes a couple months of dealing with some of those things, and you got to do what they say to do. But I mean, you're talking about the difference between a $200,000 year and $1 million year with some basic things.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I don't have any hot take on that one. I think you're right. Yeah, you have to. You will get an immediate return if you.
Right. So management, leadership, ownership. There's a return on investment. But
there's
technical
diminishing
training,
returns though if you
Yes.
once you've gone through enough management training, now we see this all the time. They're looking for you see them coach hop.
Yep.
It's like, oh, you're on your 7th coaching company. Like, what are you
Right.
doing? Well,
What was it you told me the other day that they went from one coach to another coach, and they were the highlight of this coaching company,
Oh,
and they had
geez,
them all
yeah.
over the front page, and then they moved to this other coaching company. And
And
they're
now
like,
they're
look
the
what we
highlight.
did for him!
Yeah,
Oh my god!
I know. People need to be careful. Some of these companies, they're handing this dude awards. Like, yeah, you know what? When he was with the last coaching company, he was a $2 million shop as well.
Right.
So now he's 2.4. Like, so okay, I mean, those are good numbers, great, but it's not like you went from 200,000 a year to $1 million a year. You see what I'm saying? So, and the other thing too is like, you got to be careful with the coaching companies advertising realistically or genuinely.
It's one of the reasons, we've talked about this, but we had been approached by so many different people, right? Talking about the coaching stuff. And when we decided if we were going to partner with somebody or talk to somebody about being part of the show, right?
Yeah.
That it had to be somebody legit. It wasn't going to be somebody that was out here spouting BS. It wasn't going to be somebody that was out here like just throwing random numbers at the wind. It was going to be somebody who like had a systematic approach that was honest, that was ethical. It was something we would use ourselves, right? And I think that there are so many companies out there that will tell you whatever you want to hear. And for me, that's a problem, right?
I don't know that any of them tell you exactly what you want to hear. They will all tell you that they'll help. Oh, I can get your numbers up. I can get your numbers up. And you're like, are you sure? I think you discount the fact how lazy I am. I don't think you were expecting me to work. I'm not going to do that.